Welcome to today's webinar, Maximizing the Student Experience in Core 9. My name is Katie, Communications Manager at Vitech, and I will be co-presenting today's webinar with Customer Care Specialist Bethany Maddox. Bethany and I both have experience working with the Vitech University Program and are excited to be here today. We recognize that our instructors in the Core in the Classroom program are extremely busy, and sometimes it can be hard to keep up with the latest and greatest in core features and available resources for students. Today, our goal is to provide a relevant overview to get experienced and new instructors in the best possible position to help their students. Before we get started, I do have just a few housekeeping items. We will be answering questions today at the end of the webinar. Please send your questions in as soon as you think of them through the question tab on the webinar control panel. The webinar is being recorded today. If you experience connection problems during the live presentation, a recording will be available within 24 hours of the live version. To view the webinar online, you'll just need to visit the Vitech Webinar Archive under the Resources tab on our website. You'll also receive a link to that archive in your follow-up email that you receive from GoToWebinar. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Bethany and we'll get started.
Thank you, Katie. Today we're going to focus on what's new in Core 9, some new features also from Core 8, and do a guide to resources available for students as they learn the software. I'm going to demonstrate and overview some of the high-value additions, but what I won't do is a complete walkthrough of each version, as most of you today are already Core users. Instead, I'll focus on the new features that might be easy to miss, yet bring great value. So let's start with the Model Assistant. It represents a capability in Core that begins to branch into truly assisted engineering. The intent is to better highlight the power and integration of a true model-based approach, while reducing some of the framework details required to successfully implement MBSE. You can access the Model Assistant settings through the link in the project pane. There are currently 10 Model Assistant rules offered here, and all are explained on this page. We could be here for an hour just learning about the Model Assistant rules, so instead I'll just leave you with this resource. The individual Model Assistant rules are enabled or disabled per user via the Model Assistant item in the Project Explorer tree. By default, all options are enabled. After using Core with the Model Assistant rules on for quite a while now, I've started to take them for granted. It seems so natural to me that when accessing a component that I should be able to jump directly to the root function views, which is one of the capabilities of the Model Assistant. Still, because the Model Assistant can create elements, create relationships, and rename elements, it's helpful to know exactly what it's up to. I recommend pointing your students to this resource and asking them to take a look at it as they begin working in Core. And a lot of our resources will also point them to this as well. Now, traditionally, navigation with Core has been database-centric. To access an element of interest, you started down by drilling into the specific class and then down into folders until you found what you were looking for. For those with a database-centric frame of reference and a command of the MBSE language, this was great. Those without the prerequisites could easily struggle, and your students may have been among this set. With Core 8, we raised the question of alternate navigation approaches, not to replace the database-centric paradigm, but to complement it. We hypothesized role-based structures, level-based structures, and view-based structures, to name just a few. To enable all of these approaches, we leverage the SysML approach of packages. In SysML, packages are fundamentally tools for model management. They are a type of container that can hold diagrams, elements, and other packages, creating a nested structure. Core now includes a package class that enables this behavior. As packages are created, they are shown in the project list pane here. This enables you to implement whatever packaging and navigation approaches are desired. Complementing the use of packages is the package diagram, giving the student a visual option. For details on the use of packages and the package diagram, you'll want to be sure to check out the screencast I'm publishing later this week, which will teach you just that. Systems engineering requires a host of information, objects, their interrelationships, their structures, and a mountain of properties. Buried within this massive information, sometimes literally embedded within blocks of text itself, is the most critical information of all: design-dependent and design-independent parameters. Core 9 introduces design parameters, exploiting the power and value of separately managed values with the convenience of natural text. There's a new tab on the property sheet for parameters. Here, you can manage the parameters for this element. You can then embed them in any text field. You enter the two brackets and the name of the parameter and close with two brackets. So as I type what you see here, I would type bracket, bracket, mass, bracket, bracket, and then I tab out of the field, and Core enters the value from the parameter tab here for me. Core will then maintain these values if or when they are changed, and when they are output in reports, Core will change this so it just says shall not exceed 5 kilograms, and the reference to the parameter itself doesn't even look like it's there. That text is just naturally embedded. Within Core, parameters are similar in many ways to attributes. Both exist at the individual element level, both are permission controlled, both are frequently managed through the property sheet. There are several key differences. Attributes are predefined by the project administrator, though you could extend them at any time. Parameters are user-defined at runtime. Whenever you decide you have a value that should be independently tagged and managed, you can define a new parameter. Attributes are standalone values within the context of the element. Parameters generally have an associated units field. With the exception of a string parameter, it is generally appropriate to specify a unit, such as weight in kilograms, temperature in Celsius, etc. Attributes are shown for every element in a given class. Parameters are available for every element in a given class, but shown only when populated. This allows you to establish parameters such as mass, appropriate for a hardware component, and lines of code, which would be appropriate for software component, without cluttering all elements in a class. Now, we've often said that the greatest value of the model-based approach comes not from developing the model, but exploiting the model. Core 9 introduces a library of over 70 completeness checks, countless consistency diagnostics, and a customizable framework for including your own rules. Found on the fourth tab of the property sheet here are all three components of diagnostics. The first component of model diagnostics, completeness checks, evaluates your model completeness on the fly. From the Diagnostics tab, you instantly see which key attributes and relationships have not yet been completed. Of course, not all rules are valid on day one of your project, so we created 4 levels and gave you the ability to adjust the setting. The second component of model diagnostics, the consistency checks, is a predefined and extensible set of script-based rules to highlight inconsistencies in your model. Finally, we've provided a framework for you to set up your own custom checks as the third component to diagnostics. This allows you to create virtually any check that you would like. We tried to dream up every check you might need, but over the years we've found that the best expert on your needs is you. You are probably communicating to your students that one of the rules of systems engineering is that it costs 3 to 10 times as much to correct an error for each successive state it moves through the life cycle. And helping to identify these issues early on and expose them for review is priceless. Our diagnostics feature offers you some tools to help your students do that. With the recent explosion of physical and behavioral representations available in Core, there remained a high-level void that is now served by interface and physical n-squared diagrams. These diagrams complement the existing block diagrams, presenting the information in a more structured manner suitable for interfacing, clustering, and packaging analysis. Presented in a free-form layout, the spider diagram presents a complete contextual view of a set of entities and their interrelationships. The diagram blends concepts present in an ER diagram, displaying relationships relative to an entity of interest, with concepts of a hierarchy diagram, showing multiple levels of relationships. However, unlike a hierarchy diagram, each entity is represented once and only once. In addition, the free-form presentation does not artificially imply a hierarchical relationship that may not exist. The result is an extremely powerful representation, neither traditional nor SysML, to further enrich our toolkit for analysis and communication. Presented in a free-form layout, the state transition diagram represents states, the transitions that connect them, and the events that trigger transitions. This diagram is fairly technical and more than I can cover in our webinar today. In fact, I breezed past many of the diagrams today. We are working on resources to help with this, and I'll tell you more about these later in our webinar today. With each release, Vitech continues to enhance the underlying schemas to reflect our lessons learned and best practices in the application of MBSE. Of greatest note in the Core 9 schemas is the introduction and decomposability of need lines, interfaces, and links. This provides your team direct control over the decomposition, aggregation. This also eliminates the joined through and connected through relationships and the corresponding limitations that placed on block diagrams. I fielded a lot of questions about this change through our support line, and I'm sure that some of you will have questions for me on this one too. Please send them in to me through the chat feature, or you can always email me after the webinar if you have further questions about this change. For the last few features, I'm going to get into Core and show you. Let's start with the diagram palette. Virtually anything you want to do to visually develop your system can be done via drag-drop. Let's take a look at a diagram and do that. So I can drag an element from a list and drop it on my diagram. Core is going to offer me the relationships relevant between these two, and click OK, and here we are. I can drag two diagram nodes onto each other, or two nodes from really anywhere onto each other, and create relationships. Let's create a couple new elements, and if I drag 2 or 3 onto 2, it's going to offer me those as well. So a lot of these drag-drop things that are getting really familiar in other programs and just general Windows things are now available here, and it's going to feel really natural for your students. You can drag constructs from the palette and drop them on the diagram. So I can just drop a node right on here. Now those constructs vary depending on the diagram you're on, so if I were on a behavioral view, you'll see that I get the constructs appropriate for that view. While all of the menus and toolbars remain for comfort, consistency, and a reminder of what is possible, we do expect most users to quickly gravitate to manipulating the diagrams via drag-drop because they feel so natural. Have you noticed I'm dragging everything from the right side? This over here is our diagram palette. The first tab gives you constructs specifically chosen for the diagram you are viewing. The second tab, Key Entities, gives you access to element lists that are related to this diagram. The third tab gives access to all elements. For those that think visually, the diagram palette will ease their modeling efforts, allowing them to visually build their model while maintaining the underlying database model. Not only are diagrams easier to build, they have many options now to enhance their communication. You can add pictures to diagrams in place of the nodes. You can add pictures onto the background. Sorry about that one, that didn't want to work. Let's try that one again. There we go. So there's our camera. We can add shapes to the diagram, and these can be really helpful if you want to do some kind of clustering analysis. So I can put this rectangle here to highlight that maybe these are all related to each other in another way, and I can use these shapes in a variety of methods. I can even hide diagram content. So I select the node I want to hide, I mark it for hiding, and then I set this to hidden. Now I did this with a label, so that reminds me I've hidden content. I can also do it with no label if I don't want to distract the person I'm communicating with. I'm a fan of with label just to always remind myself where I'm at, and it's so easy to switch between these views. I can even see one that tells me which ones I've marked for hiding. While technically correct diagram data is critical, these tools can help enhance communication of your data. And finally, we have perspectives. One of the challenges of MBSE is simply the language itself. To have the richness necessary to represent the various aspects of the system model requires a rich, interconnected language of classes, relationships, and attributes. I'm sure you've heard from some of your students that that's an awful lot to wrap their head around when they're new. Navigating this language was once described as using a jeweler's loop to inspect your system. It gives you great insight at the detail level, but it makes it really hard to understand at a higher level what's happening in your model. Perspectives allow you to focus on the aspects of the system model, specifically of an element that are most relevant to you at the current time. Essentially, they allow you to specify what attributes and relationships you want to see in an element's property sheet. So I can use this drop-down up here at the top to select which perspectives I want to utilize. Now, we built the Essentials perspective with your students in mind, and if you'll watch down here while I click this and see what happens, it reduced the set of relationships to those that we think are essentials are the essential set, most critical to newer students, newer projects, and we've offered several here for you. We've imagined a few. These can be customized. You can create your own. Now, before I turn this over to Katie, I want to take a few minutes to give you a tour of the many resources available to your students. We've been investing a lot of time and work into building a library for you so that you don't have to spend a minute of your valuable class time teaching core. While I'm still here in core, let's take a look at these here under the Help menu. So I'll click Help, and then let's take a look at documentation. A lot of richness here. Our guided tour is hands down one of the best resources for new students. This walks them through building a small model. If you've not done this yourself, we recommend that you do so that you'll know what's available to your students and if you want to recommend it to them. Also is the icon reference guide. This is a handy one-page printable that gives all of the buttons, all the pictures from all the buttons, and when I was new with core, I kept this right at my desk, and it helped give me a guide and to know what I was looking at. And then finally is the system definition guide. I mentioned before, all of those classes, all of those relationships. This is a detailed guide of exactly what those are. And that has a lot of diagrams in it that shows visually the relationships between the classes, only it does subset, so it's easier to wrap your mind around. So now that we've taken a look at what's in core, oh, sorry, one more thing, the help file. If you click Help Contents in core, you're going to find something pretty rich. We have been enriching these over the last few years, and there's a lot of great information in here. If your students have questions, I'd ask them first, have you checked the help files? In some programs, they're not at all helpful. I've found in core they're extraordinarily helpful, and this is often my first resource as I man our support desk. If I have a question I don't know how to answer, I look here first. So it's definitely worth recommending your students take a peek. Now let's get out to our website. Here we go. Now first, under Resources, you're going to find our screencast library. Oops. Sorry about that. I hit it. The first time you visit this page, you'll see this form. There we go. Now here's our screencast page. So we have a few collections here. It's going to open with our Getting Started with Core Commercial Edition. Just close that one because we made one just for you. Here's Getting Started with the Core University Edition. And we were careful to find and change everything that was related to the differences in Core University, such as opening your data, saving your data, and such things. And so that's all customized for you. We even created an extra one working collaboratively in Core 9 University Edition. And if your students are working on projects, highly recommended. One of my personal favorites is the resource overview. It talks about a lot of the things that I'm doing today, but since your students aren't on the webinar today, you could give them this link and they could see what all the resources available to them are. We also have a series here, Building a Simple Model, that walks the beginner through building a small sample model. Now we have even richer resources inside My Support. So if I go to My Support and log in, we're going to find premium screencasts here. You'll find the same collections we had on the other page with an additional one. This is the skill building collection, and we have been working fast and furious on this, of creating a screencast for every diagram in core. It's going to be done this week. Knock on wood, it's going to be done this week. Katie and I are working on putting the finishing touches on that right now, and we're really excited to have this for you. Each one is very focused on just that diagram, and so we hope that it's going to be a rich resource, and we look forward to hearing from you and from your students exactly how helpful that is. Now, we also have a webinar archive. All of the support-oriented webinars I do end up back here inside my support, and so you'll find things, requirements management. This one isn't related to students necessarily, but tracking changes, getting started with formal documentations and parsing data. All of those are very relevant, and this will build over time as I'm doing my webinars. About every other month is how often I do those. So now I'm going to let Katie show you just a few more resources.
Okay, so a few more things that are accessible through the web for your students that we highly recommend that they get involved with. We do have a blog that we update typically weekly, and this alternates between different discussions on the industry and then specific questions sometimes we get. We'll post a blog article about it from information from one of our principal systems engineers. Bethany also posts to it on a regular basis and gives a slightly different perspective. So we've even got risks and concerns here. You'll see that we did for Thanksgiving dinner. So we do like to try and make that relatable for you. So you can subscribe to the blog and get an update, and we also update our social media pages when there are new blog articles available. So we do recommend those for students. Also, you may find if you've got students who are active on Twitter, we do have a Twitter account, and we do post to that every time we've got new updates. So you can just search for the @Vitech Corp. We do recommend following that for information on what we're up to and also information on what's going on in the systems engineering industry. And we also have 3 options on our LinkedIn page. We've got our main page that's got also the same kind of updates that you'll see on Twitter, but with a little bit more information. So for information on what Vitech has going on and different resources as they become available. We also have a group page, which is a great place for discussion. And so if you have any questions about the software or anything you'd like to share with other users of Core or Genesis, this is a great place to post it. We are monitoring this page, and if I can't answer a question or if Bethany can't answer a question, we do send this on to our systems engineers here at Vitech to make sure that we get you a complete answer to your question. You can also discuss information with other individuals who are using Core. We have also made a group that's specific for university program instructors, and I do apologize for the absence of the top image here. LinkedIn keeps breaking it on me, but the page does work wonderfully for university instructors. If you are not a member of this group, I highly recommend that you join and post any questions you have, any problems that maybe your students may be having that you're looking for advice on. We highly encourage, if we ever have instructors that want to share models or other kinds of documents or things like that, we are looking for ways to facilitate that for you. I definitely want to make it a collaborative environment so that we can all work together in educating the next group of systems engineers. And then from there, so that's the main areas that we highly recommend as far as keeping in touch with Vitech throughout the education of working with Core, and then also just making sure that if you're on our email list, you can subscribe on our website. We give you updates about webinars and different events and opportunities as we create them. So going back to just a last few things that we want to do. Sorry about that. So we want to talk about some of the things that we can do as we're teaching to make sure that our students really understand the goals of what's going on with MBSE in general. So we can't emphasize enough to our instructors, students, and our commercial clients that consistency is key in any MBSE effort. Core provides a constantly consistent project with the underlying model. So Zane Scott, one of our vice presidents, loves to say that all systems engineering is model-based. It's just a choice of whether or not you want to expose that model, and CORE does just that. And so we also want to make sure that our students are really understanding the concept of layers. So we have strata, which is what we call our methodology that we use, and it is very tempting not to work in layers. We actually, we did a company-wide exercise just a few weeks ago that we were modeling actually our training courses, and we found how easy it is to get tempted to go really deep into one small area because that's what's top of mind. But we find that the very best models are the ones that are created with those layers. The primary advantage of the strata methodology is that no matter when the project has to pause or end, there is a full picture of the entirety of the system at the last level completed. All of the relationships between the domains are managed from the highest level view all the way down to the grittiest detail. Although the methodology was designed with the commercial client in mind, it also happens to work perfectly for classroom projects which have a clear time constraint to work from. We also want to just give one more reminder that we hear from our users all the time that CORE does so many great things automatically, and we are so happy to provide that for you through our software. But we also want to emphasize that CORE works as a partner with a systems mind. The model assistant, the diagnostics, the simulation tools are all built to assist the engineer, but there really is no substitute for the human brain. So our tools do aim to reduce that perspiration and help catch oversights, and our main goal is that the full potential of that system thinking or engineering brain can be unlocked. And so we want to highly encourage you, if you've got any questions or comments on today's webinar, that you will reach out to us. We do have a few questions that have come into us that we would like to go ahead and address. This first one I'm going to pass off to Bethany. We've got that Laura asks, CORE no longer computes the through relationships, but I still need those relationships at the top level. How can I do this?
All right, let me switch back into CORE, Katie, and I'm going to demonstrate something here. There we go. Okay, so those through relationships were used in your block diagrams, such as, let's do interface block. So in Core 8, some of these relationships would have been computed. Core would look down the layers and see that there were relationships between components down low and say, hey, you need them up top, let me do that for you. Well, that was helpful. On the other hand, it constrained you. It did not give you the ability to decompose links or interfaces, and it was restricting you a little bit. So we've opened that up and given you control. Now, with that control comes the little bit of work needed to do to create these on the top level. So it's important that you know there's no through relationships going to build on these block diagrams. You build those on your own. But we built a little resource to help identify them. I talked before about diagnostics, and this is a great example of we needed to give you a tool to look on the lower levels and see if there are relationships that you need to have happening there. So if you use your run script icon, we will find identify implied connections. There she is. This script is going to look down into your data, find those implied connections on the lower, those actual connections on the lower level, and tell you where we need those on the higher level. And it's just going to give you an output, and so then your students can use that output to go in and make those higher level relationships, thus replacing the through relations. We're actually going to create, if I look at the property sheet here of Geospatial Library, I will see it is connected to a link instead of connected through. You'll never see those in the Core 9 schema. You'll always see connected to. Okay?
All right, we've got one more question here. Matt asks, he says, I've been a university instructor in the past, but I'm not currently using CORE. How can I get started back up? So we've done a lot of things over the last year or so to try and streamline that process to get set up in CORE for your classroom. So I would highly recommend you just email me at that kthacker@vitechcorp.com email address, and I can get you the registration information and get you all set up to be an instructor in our program. If you have colleagues who are interested who have not participated, we are going to be trying to use this webinar with some other types of demos and things like that to help get them set up in the program. So I do highly recommend that, and I would love to hear from you to get you set up, especially as we start planning for that winter session or spring semester at many universities. So that actually wraps up the questions that we have for today's presentation. If you have any other questions or comments for us, please don't hesitate to shoot either of us an email at the addresses on the screen, or you can post your questions and comments on the LinkedIn pages that I mentioned before. If you visit linkedin.com and search for Vitech Corporation or Vitech University Program, you'll be able to find those groups. Both of them are ones that you'd have to apply to join, but I manage that application, and I will be able to get you approved and get you into those groups. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Please keep an eye out in your email for our next webinar invitation, which will be happening in January. And at the conclusion of this webinar today, a survey is going to open on your screen. We'd appreciate it if you take a moment to give us some feedback on today's presentation, or to let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.